Okay, thank you, Lisa. I'm Neil Taylor. I'm an area manager in Lancashire Fire and Rescue Service, head of service delivery, and I'm also the chair of Firefit, which is one of the National Fire Chiefs Council's groups. I'll just ask Emily to briefly introduce yourself.
So I'm Dr Emily Watkins, and I'm an environmental and exercise physiologist from the University of Roehampton. I'm also vice chair of Firefit and a member of the new NFCC academic collaboration group as well.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk briefly about three things. I'll cover quickly what Firefit is, what's the aim of Firefit. I'll talk about some challenges, not just Firefit stuff, but what wider challenges for the sector in terms of understanding of the menopause and things we can all consider around the menopause. And then hopefully some sort of considerations and then we'll lead into Emily. Just reflecting briefly on what Dr Rebecca was saying then. Around the medical sector and going through medical school and people not talking about the menopause, that really resonated because, you know, during my 28 years in the fire service, it's something we don't talk about. You know, I'm pretty sure that's not just in Lancashire, I'm pretty sure that's across. So in terms of seeing so many people here today, it's absolutely amazing. It's a fantastic opportunity, and each and every one of us have now got a job to go back to our services. We can be change agents. You think about the culture, you think about influencing back across that sector in all our services. We've all got a real role to play there. So I think it's an important one, but it was a really good point Dr Rebecca made there. So in terms of Firefit, I mean, what we do is on the screen there, so I'm not going to read that out word for word. But we do provide that forum, we do have discussions, and one of the things we've been talking about recently is how can we provide better responses, better awareness in terms of menopause, and Emily will talk about that a little more detail shortly. Now, culture-wise, I just mentioned before, didn't I, about going back to services and having those conversations. But in terms of culture, you know, that is the real foundation of what we do back in our services. In terms of that inclusivity, having those conversations, the values and behaviours, having the trust, the respect, the openness to sort of listen, understand what all of our colleagues are going through, and try everyone has all got a role to try and provide that support. So there's that leadership at all levels. You know, no matter what we all do, we can all play a part there. Do you mind me just asking from the room, I know we'll have a blend of different staff from different services, we'll have some operational and some non-operational. Do you mind just doing a quick show of hands if you're from an operational role in terms of firefighter to, okay, I'm sure there'll be tons of non-operational. I know we've got some service fitness advisors, colleagues from occupational health, hopefully some from sort of human resources, and leaders and managers throughout services. But it's great just to get that understanding so we can sort of tailor the talk a little bit around that. One thing we've tried to do on Firefit as well is blend together fitness and the wider health and well-being. And why are we doing that? Well, first of all, fitness, as we know, there's a lot of benefits from exercise. And again, reflecting on earlier speakers and Dr Rebecca, huge benefits there in terms of cardiovascular, you know, you think about cardiovascular diseases, heart disease, stroke, you think about diabetes, osteoporosis, cognitive decline. There's huge benefits there in getting exercise done at an early age, you know, well before you start getting into perimenopause and menopause itself. So that's a really big one. And in terms of that exercise, consistency is key. You know, I know there's all sorts of things out there in terms of CrossFit, workout of the day, loads of sort of aerobic challenges that people like doing. But one thing I would say is consistency. Even if it's going out for a brisk walk 3 times a week, 15 or 20 minutes, that's a great starting point, and you can build that into your routine, whether that's at lunchtime or whether it's any other time. Just get out there and, you know, embed that into your working practices for whatever you're doing. And we also know there's a lot of research around the benefits of exercise in terms of mental health and well-being. You know, there's publications out there in terms of the Royal Foundation, the work that was done there, Mind, Oscar Kilo, you know, there's lots and lots of documentation out there that give us examples of that and also some key things to think about. Some of the challenges I mentioned before, and I'll whiz through these, so I don't want to eat into Emily's time too much, but we know, again, research papers, so we've got the Tony Williams report from 2013 that talks about the national pension age and challenges for the workforce as we get older and the ability to perform the role. So there's extensive sort of research and evidence base within that paper, so that's something, you know, we all need to consider. There's loads and loads of other academic studies around decline in cardiovascular output as we age, and also around MSK and the impacts of aging for all those different things. Whether you're a member of the Firefit group, as I know we've got a few here, or you know, in an operational role, you'll know that we've got occupational employment standards. We've got a fitness test that we do at point of entry, but we also do routinely through our careers as well. So that is the same, no matter if you're in your 20s or in your 50s. So, you know, these are all challenges that we're facing. One thing that has been particularly challenging, and we love data, you know, it gives us so much insight into, you know, where we are and what those challenges are, and then you can interpret that and see if there's anything else you can do at an earlier stage. But unfortunately, we've not got a huge amount of data in terms of demographics of females of that sort of menopausal age, whether that's sort of in 40s or particular sort of 50s plus. We will talk in a while though around what we're trying to do to get a better understanding. Firefighting population versus general population. Again, the firefighting population, if you're out on doing your drills or, you know, performing, going to incidents and you're running out hose, putting up ladders, you're doing some cardiovascular output there, and you're also doing some load-bearing output. So again, going back to that data, it makes it challenging to determine specifically for firefighters and operational staff what the other considerations are around that, because a lot of the studies out there from academia talks about the general population. I've mentioned cultural challenges and leadership, so I won't dwell too much on that. And then Emily is going to talk around the challenges around PPE and thermoregulation, which will be a good one. So policy, again, very quickly, I've spoken to various services and what we've got in Lancashire. You know, it's great to have policy. We've got our Lancashire one. I know Warren at the back there, North Yorkshire's put a brilliant one together that goes into a little bit more detail around fitness and how exercise can be of benefit. Humberside, I'm not sure if any colleagues here from Humberside, absolutely fantastic in terms of that content. London Fire Brigade have published policy around menopause as well, and really goes into detail around that inclusivity, so considering sort of trans, non-binary, different race, etc., which I know has been touched on today. So, you know, one thing, please go back, have a look, has your service got a policy? If not, try and encourage the service to work towards getting one. A few final sort of quick take-homes. Peer support. I know in Lancashire we've got the Women in Families group. I know there's the Women in the Fire Service group that have events throughout the year as well. But again, it's that chance to speak. It's that chance to kind of try and problem solve and work together collaboratively. Firefit, it is one of our priorities over the coming year to try and improve what we do around menopause, understanding and awareness, and hopefully we'll work together and work collaboratively with other groups to try and develop some best practice that can then work alongside some of the policies that services have. And again, those service fitness advisors and leaders in services can go away and help provide additional support. And that's the final point from me. I've probably just gone over the 5 minutes.
You're right.
I didn't get to so hand over to Dr Emily.
Thank you. So thank you very much, everyone, for inviting me here today and for allowing me to be a part of this absolutely fantastic conference, I think. I've been working with the Fire and Rescue Service doing various bits of research around health and well-being for the past, 8 to 10 years now. And being able to be in a room with so many female employees is one thing, but actually having a base to talk about the menopause and talking about issues that are specific to women is actually incredible. So thank you very much to the organisers for actually putting this event on to begin with as well. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview in terms of a recent survey we looked at with firefighters, and also then talk very briefly from a thermoregulation and from a fitness perspective. Only got a little bit of time, so hopefully it'll be just a little overview and a few perhaps take-home things that you might be able to think about going back to your services. So a little while ago, we ran an international survey looking at the concerns to do with health and well-being that female firefighters might have. We ran this internationally, and we had over 800 respondents altogether, and around 255 respondents from the UK. We asked a huge range of questions about different aspects to do with their job. So today I'm just going to focus on the aspects to do with more menopause focused. So one of the first things we asked was whether they felt confident that they would be able to do their job at the age of 60, whether they would be able to meet the physical demands of their job, whether they'd be mentally toughness, whether they felt they were going to be able to do that. And overall, we had 31% that said they would struggle, but they think it would be achievable. 53% said they couldn't, and 16% were the only number who said they would be able to do it. So of all of our respondents, 16% of women said they'd be able to confidently say they could meet the demands of their job at 60, which to me was quite a shocking statistic. And it said that we needed to do something about why they felt that way and get a better understanding of it. So we asked them what type of things they were worried about, what was influencing this. We didn't have any drop-down boxes, it was just open category for them to write what they felt. We then themed these responses, and you can see here, these are the type of things that they were feeling that meant that they were concerned about being able to do their job at the age of 60. So if you look down the list, we've got things like meeting fitness standards, lack of strength. We've also got mental toughness as part of that as well, resilience to be able to do the job, issues to do with injury, night shifts. The menopause itself featured as something that came up fairly frequently, particularly in the UK and Ireland, as something that was a concern. So we asked those who were currently experiencing the menopause if it had any impact on their working life. And 39% of those who said they were currently menopausal said it impacted them on a regular basis at work. We asked them why, what it was that was impacting them, and there was a range of issues, and hopefully you're recognizing these as being similar to the type of symptoms that we were talking about in the presentations earlier. And we have a range of physiological aspects, but also the psychological things too. So the fatigue was a really big concern, mood changes, dizzy spells, hot flushes, strength losses. Perhaps the strength loss here is something that you maybe don't see in other occupationals quite so much, as something that individuals are concerned about, because perhaps it's not such an issue in other occupations as it would be in a firefighting scenario. We also asked women who weren't yet menopausal if it was something they were worried about in terms of their future at work. 36% said they were worried about the menopause in their future. And again, we asked them why. They had physiological concerns about changes in temperature regulation and hot flushes, changes in strength and fitness. They also had concerns around mental health, about embarrassment or the culture of being in a male-dominated environment, and also around lack of knowledge. That was lack of knowledge to do with what they knew was going to happen to their body, but also about what consequences there might be and what support was going to be available and how to go about accessing that. So this really highlights to me, and it kind of echoes some of the conversations earlier, that the menopause isn't just for those undergoing the menopause that need to think about this and be concerned. It's about everyone at all points in their career. And I thought it was a brilliant comment earlier on about how important it perhaps is to talk about this at recruit stage and understand what's going on and what might happen in the future. So it's not something that women are worried about, perhaps. It's something they already have that knowledge to hand, and so they know what the options are going forward. And I think that's such an important thing to think about. So we could have a whole day talking about all these different factors, and I'm sure everyone else who's talked today could agree with me on that one. I'm going to very briefly just talk about the temperature regulation part and then the change in strength and fitness part. So in terms of thermoregulation then, perhaps slightly more of a concern maybe from an individual who is a firefighter than perhaps other occupations. So if you think about your firefighting role, the immediate thing that probably springs into mind is going into a fire and it's a hot environment. And that is where perhaps you might start thinking about these hot flushes of being concerned, which totally makes sense. But the other aspect is also just doing other incidents attendance where you're wearing PPE, is wearing thick, kind of heavy equipment that's reducing your ability to dissipate heat because you're reducing your availability for evaporation off of your skin. You're also putting on the extra layer that you're carrying as well. And often you're doing tasks that are physically active. So even if you're not in a firefighting scenario, you're likely going to be carrying heavy things and moving things about. So your body themselves is going to be producing a hotter temperature at too. So it's not just the fire scenarios we're thinking about, but it's also those other incidences that people are attending that's of concern too. So if we all think about our bodies for a moment and you think about where you feel right now, some of you in the room perhaps might have chills and shivers, hopefully not, because I think the aircon's not too bad right now, I think it's okay. Some of you might be sitting here thinking, oh, maybe a little bit sweaty, perhaps a little bit of a hot face, I've probably got little pink cheeks going on. But maybe you're sat here and you're feeling okay. You're not really thinking about the temperature too much. You're neither hot nor cold, there's no shivering going on, there's no sweating going on. If you're like that right now, we say you're in your thermoneutral zone. So this is where you feel happy and confident, your temperature's neither one way or the other, and you're fairly confident there. Now, typically, we say that there's a bit of a range in terms of your core body temperature can increase a little bit, can decrease a little bit, and you're still in that happy little zone. Typically, most people have a range of around 0.4 degrees Celsius of change that your core temperature can go to before you start reaching what we call the thresholds. If you get too cold, you reach your threshold that might start you shivering. If you get too hot, you reach your threshold that might start you sweating. There's a suggestion with the menopause, and there's quite a lot of research from a menopause perspective that is unclear, and there's not that much that exists, which makes it a little bit difficult to say for definitive proof. But there's evidence that's suggestive that your thermoneutral zone decreases with the menopause. So that range of fluctuation that you might be able to have normally is perhaps reduced a little bit with the menopause, meaning you're likely to reach your sweating threshold, that kind of top limit where that sweating starts, perhaps a lot sooner. So to have a look at what happens when we do put an individual in fire kit in a hot environment in a bit more of a controlled way, we had some menopausal ladies walk in our heat chamber wearing their PPE to see what actually happened to their core temperature responses and their psychological responses in terms of perceptions to the heat as well. This is only pilot data, so we haven't had that many individuals through it. So we compared their data from people who had regular menstrual cycles to those who are menopausal. So on the graph there you can see time across the bottom, you've got core temperature up the side, and then my open squares are the menopausal individuals and the filled in ones are those with regular cycles. Now hopefully you're looking at that graph going, there's not very much going on there. They're very similar to each other. And that's exactly what's happening. So those with regular menstrual cycles had a very similar pattern to those who were menopausal. Their core temperature increased in the same kind of way. There was no big spikes or anything significantly different that were happening. And in fact, when we look at it from a statistical significance perspective, there is no difference occurring. When we look at the end temperature that we can see on there, we see kind of high 39s, 38s-ish. And actually, the point of interest here is that when we think about heat stroke being the most severe heat illness and being potentially, fatal and very severe in consequences, we normally think about 40.5 degrees Celsius and that and above as the temperature of worry. And we also think about that kind of being close to that, 39s, perhaps we're a little bit concerned. But what we actually see here is that perhaps menopausal women are no more at risk from a heat stroke in terms of a core temperature perspective than any other woman might be. So it's not necessarily menopause that might be putting them at a higher risk here. The thing to think about though, we did have one woman during this scenario who had a hot flush. One. So not everybody who goes into a hot environment who has the menopause is going to have this symptom. It's not the case, and I think that echoes what was being said earlier on. It's not everybody who will experience all symptoms. The individual who did, though, did feel symptoms of a heat illness, so your nausea, your kind of dizziness scenario, those headaches. And so really it's the perceptual side of things that are incredibly important to pay attention to, not just say what your core temperature is. The perception of heat illnesses is very, very important. So what can we actually do about it then? Well, there's a range of different things that we can think about. Some of them may be straightforward and you might already be doing in your services. So hydration is incredibly important for doing anything in the heat. Only 1% of dehydration in body weight loss can lead to an increase in core temperature of about 0.12 to 0.25 degrees Celsius. And that 1% decrease from body weight from a hydration perspective can also lead to a 3 to 5 beats per minute increase in heart rate. So a very simple thing in terms of testing your wee in the morning, perhaps working out your sweat rate, which is fairly easy to do, can help you to be a little bit better at coping in the heat. You can also think about cooling strategies. So making sure for those scenarios where there is heat exposure, or perhaps even for scenarios where you're just doing a bit of exercise in that PPE, or maybe just in the office, making sure there is shade and shelter away from heat in a midday sun, making sure perhaps if you're in a facility where aircon is a possibility, thinking about pre-cooling, post-cooling, using ice slurries, arms in buckets of cold water, all different things that can help from a cooling perspective. We've also got exercise as well, so being physically active regularly and also maintaining a healthy body weight can all help to improve your ability to cope in the heat too. A key point on here though is that everybody will experience symptoms differently, so what works for one person doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for somebody else. Another key point on here is that all of these interventions are helpful from the health of firefighters, even if you're not experiencing the menopause. So helping to reduce the physiological strain on a daily basis, helping to reduce the inflammation that might be occurring as a result of the exposures, this can help in those scenarios. So it's not just menopausal women who would benefit from policies that introduce cooling activities, for instance. Talk a little bit then from a fitness perspective, and some of this has already been touched on today, which I was really happy to see. So from a strength, looking at it first, so thinking about muscle mass, I've just put a nice image on there from Chambers et al. That shows what a muscle mass might look like in a young woman and then perhaps an older healthy woman. And we can see on there an increase in fat mass and a loss in muscle mass that's occurring with aging. And typically with the menopause, we see around a 0.6% per year muscle loss occurring. Now, a caveat to this is males also experience muscle loss with aging. And when we look at the data a little bit more closely, some of these kind of muscle mass loss can also perhaps be associated with change in age, but also to do with lifestyle factors. So people becoming more sedentary and also to do with the increase in weight gain that might be occurring. So there's a suggestion of around 1.7% increase in fat mass per year to go with this muscle mass loss. So it's not just the menopause that might be contributing to this. And so lifestyle factors are incredibly important as part of that. We also see a decrease in bone mass density, which I'm not going to talk about because there was a lovely picture of it earlier on, but we know that over time we get this decline in bone mass in our bones, and we also see that kind of increased with the menopause occurring. From a cardiovascular perspective, then, we see similar types of decreases, and the suggestion if they're around a 0.5 to a 2.4% per year decrease in VO2 max that occurs with the menopause. So we're talking perhaps fairly small decreases, perhaps larger, so suggesting there is some individual variability here. And that's important, not just to meet the demands of, say, a firefighting job, but also to meet the demands of your daily life, to be able to walk up the stairs, to be able to carry that shopping. So it's not just the case that this applies from a firefighter scenario, but it's across the board. And VO2 max is really strongly linked to lots of other factors, like the risk of getting cardiovascular diseases, to things as basic as kind of being able to recover quickly after surgery. So VO2 max is something that is incredibly important to maintain. And so interventions, what can we do about this? Physically active is important, so doing some weight-bearing exercise around 3 times a week, and that's not just going out for a really long run. That might not be appropriate for everybody. So it's about thinking about what works for the individual, what is a type of exercise that they're going to stick at as well, and thinking about what their training was like before. We also want to be doing some activity in terms of resistance training, again, ideally around 3 times a week, and all muscle groups in the body if possible too. The caveats to a lot of our data suggest that although with training, with regular activity, we're able to maintain some of those declines or reduce the kind of significance of them. So the data does support that this is beneficial. The caveat is that a lot of our data, as Neil alluded to, is based on the general population, or based a handful of the times on kind of perhaps more master level athletes. We don't know that much about what happens to female firefighters, and it's something that we would like to know more about. Thinking about your lifestyle overall, so a little bit earlier on about in terms of diet, think about how much time you're spending sitting. There's a really strong link between sitting time and VO2 max, and you can imagine which way the link goes. So reducing the amount of time you're sat down can help as well. And overall, if anything you take away from this to go back and tell anyone else, to me it's act now. The more information we can give women at this stage, at the early stage of their careers, the more chance they've got to be able to understand what's coming and be less worried about it. But also the more time they've got to improve their fitness and improve their health early. And if you think about all those graphs showing this decrease, well, if you're hopefully starting at a slightly better point before the menopause is happening, then maybe with support you can be at a better place in terms of maintaining that. The Act Now also comes in part of making sure that people are seeking support where they need to. So although we talked about, I've focused very much on the lifestyle side of things, because I was hoping everyone else would cover more of the medical side of things, it's important that they're encouraged to seek support and medical support, and doing that at an early enough stage to really benefit from it. And so what next? And I'm hoping that this might open up for a little bit of conversation perhaps over lunch, is that there are lots of things that we don't know and we would like to know more about. And we'd like to know from you what you'd like to know more about. So part of that, for me moving forward, is perhaps thinking about optimizing some cooling strategies in terms of ways that are logistically possible from a firefighting perspective, thinking about training programs that are specific for firefighters, thinking about PPE considerations. So what kit is worn? Do you always need to wear full PPE, or are there other alternatives that could be utilized during different incidents that can help? Thinking about improving the understanding of general health conditions of females as well, and also thinking about if we can help in any way for best practice guidance. As part of this, just a tiny plug, is that we are currently just launched a survey that looks at firefighter health and well-being from quite a broad understanding to try and get an understanding of what the different types of health issues are amongst firefighters. Part of this survey asks very specifically about female health. It asks about fertility questions, it asks questions about menstrual cycle, and it asks a little bit of questions about menopausal symptoms. So if that's something that you'd like to be a part of, the link is there and the QR code is there. I will say it works slightly better on a computer or an app, an iPad rather than a phone, but it would be great to have your kind of insight on there if you'd be happy to take part. All the information is on there, but I'm happy to answer questions as well. And so I'd just like to finish up by saying, we'd really like to know from you what gaps you think there are in knowledge so that we can try and help fill them moving forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.